Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another race preview. Today, we are looking at the Toronto Marathon and Half. This is a good spring race this year, especially with Mississauga canceling its marathon this year. Lots of people doing the marathon and half here in Toronto. So a good consolidated spring race for everyone this year, which will be exciting. So we're looking at the race that's on May 7th, 2023. So at this point, we are about 5.5 weeks out as I record this at the end of March here. So I'm going to give some tips today on what you can be doing the final weeks, the days leading up, the morning of, during the race, and a little preview of the course maps today as well. So myself, my name is Mark Cullen. I'm the co-founder and head coach at the LP Endurance Club. We are based out of Kitchener-Waterloo, but we have athletes all over Canada who follow our structured training programs to go after all their running, triathlon, cycling goals. So you can check out our website there. Also, give us a follow on Instagram at LP Endurance. We got lots of great training tips there as well. I will be racing the marathon as well here in Toronto. So I've done the half and marathon a number of times over the years here. Have always enjoyed the race. And if you see me, come say hi. I'm always happy to chat running and always get excited to hear everybody's race challenges and what big goals they're going after. So if you see me on course or pre-race, definitely stop by and say hello. Always love to meet new people, especially fellow runners. All right, let's get into the goods today. So as I record this, we're right at the end of March. March 29th is when I'm recording this. So I'm going to focus mostly on the marathon and half today. If you are doing the relay, 5K or 10K, I would recommend looking at more of the info on the Toronto Marathon website. I'm going to focus mostly on the marathon and half because that's what most of my athletes are racing, and I think the bulk of participants. So final weeks of the marathon. So I'm going to run you through kind of what I get a number of my athletes to do from a mileage and long run perspective, as well as some workouts. So one of my favorite prep workouts for the marathon, I usually do this about 4 to 5 weeks out from my race in one of my final peak long runs, and get a number of my athletes to do this to really get dialed in on their marathon pace. So I get them to do something like 3 to 4 times 20 minutes at goal marathon pace with a nice 5 minutes in between it. And it's not a full recovery. So say if your marathon pace is 5 minutes per kilometer, I might get them to do something like 5:30 to 5:45 during the float section, just so it's not a full recovery on there, or you're not quite getting the total stimulus you're looking for in a marathon pace workout like this. It's also fine if you do it easy as well. I think you can still learn a lot about where that kind of marathon pace falls, especially in those last 1 to 2 reps. You'll start to know if maybe you've overcooked it and need to adjust your pacing strategy as well. But I do this inside of one of my peak long runs. So say if my final long run about 4 weeks out is like 35K, then I'll do this. Maybe I'll do 5 or 6K warm up, and then I'll do the 4 by 20 minutes at marathon pace with 5 minutes easy between each of them. And with this is a great chance for a dress rehearsal for your race. So I'm waking up at 2 to 3 hours before this workout. I'm doing what I would do for my race breakfast. Even the night before, I'm prepping, like maybe I'm going to do my usual pasta dinner or my chicken, sweet potatoes, rice dinner, one of those two the night before. Do my race breakfast, and then practice my in-race fueling strategy, as well as wearing my race gear for at least part of it. I would probably wear my gear for all of it, but my shoes I would put on for a section of it probably. I use what's in the background there, the Nike Alpha Flies, and they don't have tons of mileage on them before they start to fall apart. So I like to save them and limit the miles on them before the actual race. So I probably wouldn't use them for my whole long run, but I would like to get some of the intervals probably during it in. But these are great chances, especially that 4 to 5 weeks out, where you can start to practice a lot of those key things that you'll need on race day. So when you get there, it's just one less thing to think about, and you're going to have those pre-race nerves. So this will keep you a lot calmer. So when we talk about 4 to 5 weeks to go, so I'm talking as if it's like a Monday. So when I say like 2 weeks out there, I put actually the dates of the start of the weeks there, so you can see which kind of weeks I'm referring to. So that'd be April 3rd and 10th would be the 4 to 5 weeks to go. So these are kind of my final peak mileage weeks that I get my athletes to do, and some of those final prep workouts like that one at the top. Usually these are the kind of peak long runs in the 30 to 36K range, depending on the level of the athlete. I usually don't like them to be out running more than about 2:45 to 3 hours total on some of their peak long runs. So some of the faster athletes might get up closer to 36K. Some of my not as fast athletes might end up closer to 30 to 32K, which is totally fine as well. And then when we talk about 3 weeks to go, this is where I'm starting. So you'll see on the next slide, the half marathon's a little bit different in how I set it up, but the marathon needs a little more lead time because we've done a little extra work. Those long runs take a lot, so we taper starting a little bit earlier. So when we talk about 3 weeks out to go, I'm dropping from the peak mileage about 15 to 20%. So just for round numbers, I'm going to use, if my peak mileage 4 to 5 weeks out was 100 kilometers per week, I'm probably chopping down to something like 80 kilometers in the 3 weeks to go. My long run's going to be a lot of that chop down. So maybe my weekday stuff is pretty similar, but my long run's going to be probably close to 10K less, which is going to adjust for a lot of the mileage drop, and then probably start trimming on some of those other runs in the week as well. And then when we talk about 2 weeks out from the race, so this is really like the week, like when you get to the weekend before the race, but I'm talking like full weeks. So at that point, I'm probably 30 to 40% from the peak. So again, if we're talking that 100K number, I'm probably down to closer to 60K the week before, and my long run's a lot shorter in the 16 to 20K. And both of those final two long runs, when I talk the 16 to 20K or the 20 to 25K, I usually still have some sort of marathon prep like work in there. Nothing too crazy like the kind of top prep workout, but I might have something like in the 3 weeks out long run, like a 3x2K, where you start at marathon pace and end like half marathon pace. And then the 2 weeks that workout, I might have like a 4 or 5K tempo at marathon pace in the middle of the run. Just again, we want to chop down a lot of that mileage, but we don't want to lose that sharpness and be stale by the time we get to the race. So those are some keys just to keep in there. You don't want to just totally drop all the mileage and intensity and then come to that race and you're super flat. And then when we talk about actual race week, so that week I'm doing pretty limited runs. So if I'm typically running 5 days in a week, I might do 2 to 3 runs during the week leading into the race. And they would be definitely probably 2 shorter ones and one kind of mid-length one on maybe the Wednesday before the race, where I'm running something like 8 to 10K with maybe something like 6 minutes of marathon pace and like 4x90 seconds, a little bit faster at closer to 10K pace. And I would, again, just staying sharp, kind of keeping that nervous system and the legs rolling so that I'm ready for the race on Sunday. And then maybe on a Friday or Saturday, I would do a final shakeout run in the 5 to 7 kilometer range. Super, super easy, probably like a minute 30 per K slower than my goal marathon pace. And then maybe I would throw in a couple like 30-second pickups, 2 to 3 by 30 seconds at something around marathon or half marathon pace, just to kind of wake up the system and again make sure you're not flat for race day. For some of these marathon prep ones, if you have a recent race result, there's lots of online calculators. I use the Jack Daniels VDOT, so VDOT. If you search that up online, you can put a past result in that's recent, and you can get kind of your pacing, what you should expect for the marathon, so that you make sure you don't go out way too hard in the marathon. And you can also test it on a bunch of workouts in the final weeks leading up to the race as well, so you're not just going in blind when you get to the actual race. All right, let's talk about the half marathon. So I showed you that favorite marathon prep workout. So usually about 3 weeks out from the half marathon, I'll get my athletes to do something along the lines of 3 by 15 minutes at half marathon pace, with that same 5-minute kind of easy float at 30 to 45 seconds per K, slower than that half marathon pace. Again, that's inside of probably a longer peak long run for them. And again, I'm doing that full dress rehearsal night before, race morning, fueling, race gear, put it all together on that day. So the rule of thumb is always nothing new on race day. So half marathon, we do a little bit less of a taper for it, just because overall volume typically and long runs are a little bit shorter in a half marathon prep block. So those 3, 4, 5 weeks out are kind of those final 3 weeks where you're kind of really getting dialed in. I'm not usually building a ton of mileage in that bit. My athletes will have already got to kind of the peak part and they're just kind of holding across there. And we're entering some of these very specific half marathon workouts. And then 2 weeks out, or really like the week before the race, is where I'm going to do a pretty sharp drop off. So let's use for the half marathon 50 kilometers as my kind of peak mileage that the person had. So if we're doing 50K for the week and I'm dropping it 40%, then they're probably going down to something like 30K the week before. And their long run going from, most of them will be running something in the 18 to 24K range for some of these peak long runs. And then cutting down to 13 to 17 the week before. Again, I'd probably have something in there like a 2x2K or maybe a 5K tempo at half marathon pace still the week before, just to continue to stay sharp. Race week stays very similar to the marathon in that if your frequency of running is 4 or 5 days a week, then you'll probably do 1 or 2 less runs in that week, mostly super easy jogging. And then just some short sharpening reps in that week as well. But biggest thing is don't just totally cut down and do no running that week, because you'll come into the race and your body will be like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And then you'll be a little shocked on that day. So we just want to stay sharp, but we don't want to add any extra load. No panic training or anything in those final 2 weeks. You're better to come in slightly undercooked than trying to push it in those last 1 to 2 weeks and end up overtrained or with an injury. So undercooked is definitely the way to go. All right, let's go getting closer to the race. So we talked about those final couple weeks in there. So it can be hectic and overwhelming in those couple days before the race, but the more you can pre-plan things, the more you can make this nice and smooth and take some of those pre-race nerves out of it. We all tend to get race brain and start to forget things the day before. So make sure you got a good list of things. You've tested everything ahead of time, and then there's nothing new coming on those final days. So first, respecting the taper, like I was mentioning on the last one, do not self-sabotage. I see so many athletes going out like the week before their race and being like, I'm going to try and run a half marathon at my goal pace just to test it out. It's like, don't waste your best efforts in a training run the week before the race. Just stay the course, save it up. And if you taper right and go in that race environment, you're going to have a great day out there. You got tons of people around there to push and suffer with. So save it for that day. No panic training in the last 2 weeks. You'll just end up injured, overtrained, and waste your best efforts in training. All right. And then when we look at carbs and electrolytes, so these are going to be key factors in allowing you to push right till the end of these half and full marathons. So really just in your diet, just starting to up the carbs a little bit in terms of your total macros in your diet there. So just starting to limit the fats a little bit and that fibrous stuff, and then going more towards easy digesting carbs in the 1 to 2 days out. I was mentioning one of my favorites is like pasta the night before, or I do like chicken with some sweet potatoes and rice. I find is easy on the stomach as well. But don't feel like you need to do this if you're going to eat some like larger meals to like carb load for this. Make them kind of the breakfast and lunch the day before, and then leave just kind of a regular sized dinner the night before. One thing I see athletes do a lot is do this like massive carb dinner the night before the race. And then when they get there the next morning, they're not used to this. It's all sitting in their gut, and then they have gut issues for the race. So give your body some time to digest those 2 meals during the day, and then just have a regular size meal the night before. And then you can top up the morning of with your race stuff. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. In terms of packets, so the great thing about this race, there's no expo before the race, but so you can get your bib mailed out to you, which is really nice, that you don't need to run into town the day before, especially for someone like myself who lives an hour or so away from Toronto. I can just drive in the morning of. So you can get them mailed, but if you didn't opt for the mail option, there is pickup at Exhibition Place Friday or Saturday. You can check those details on the Toronto Marathon website. And then 1 to 2 days before, you're laying out your race kit, making sure you get your bib pinned on there. and then taking a look at the weather so you know various options for different weather depending on what we're going to get that day. It's always interesting this time of year. You might get a colder, a hotter day, a windy day, a rainy day. You want to be prepared for all options and maybe bring all those options with you the morning of, and then you can always check them in your bag if you're making a last second decision here. And then for that morning of, like, making sure you're setting multiple alarms and working backwards on the schedule. So for example, I'm running the marathon. I know it starts at 7:30. I want to be there roughly an hour before the race. So my goal is to be there at the start line around 6:30. So I will be aiming to take the shuttle around 5:45 or 6 a.m. when those marathon shuttles start, because I know it takes about half an hour to get up there. So if I do that, I will leave myself lots of time to have lots of washroom breaks, work out the pre-race nerves. There's nothing worse than showing up to the start line 10 minutes before and being in a rush or missing the bag drop or something like that. That just adds an extra level of stress that you do not need on race day. It is stressful and exciting enough. You want some time to settle the mind, get the body ready, and ready to perform at your best. So let's talk about race day. So breakfast 2 to 3 hours before, really focusing on a carb centric breakfast. So one of my favorite is like a bowl of oats and a banana, and then I'll usually have a coffee. I'm sipping on water with electrolytes in it. The biggest thing the 2 days before the race is people often are just guzzling water and they're not adding electrolytes to it. And all you do is flush out the electrolytes in your system if you just only drink water. So I use Precision Hydration, has some really cool effervescent tabs similar to like a Noon that's on course. But just adding that to your water in the 2 days before and the morning of the race, you get that sodium preload you need, that allows you in a marathon. There's many reasons for cramping, but one of them could be related to sodium. So just making sure you're topped off on that. I'll talk about what you can do during the race for that as well, but making sure you are topped off. So that morning, I'm typically having a probably close to 1,000 milligrams of sodium in that morning between my water. And then I'm also, after I've had this kind of carb centric breakfast, I'm also sipping on some Precision Hydration fuel that has about 60 grams of carbs and another 500 milligrams of sodium in it. So I'm really trying to stay topped off before the race. As I mentioned, I was talking about you how I work backwards to make sure I'm giving myself enough time at the start line, but just give yourself lots of time. You'll have the nervous washroom breaks the morning of, so just give yourself ample time for that. I can't stress that enough. When you're taking those shuttles, just don't forget you need to prepay for those before April 15th, because this is a point-to-point course starting up at Young and Shepherd and then heading down towards the X. And then those buses run from Hotel X and the Hilton, I believe, starting at 5:45 a.m. Don't forget for bag check, marathoners, you need to have that bag checked by 7 a.m. sharp and 8 a.m. for the half marathoners. Try and stay warm inside if you can until you're going out to do your warm up before the race. So for somebody like a marathoner, I'd recommend something in the 5 to 10 minutes of easy jogging just before the race, maybe a couple little pickup strides at race pace just to kind of wake the body up. I personally like to bring an old jacket with me and wear it pretty much right till the race start, just to keep a little extra warmth. You don't want to overdress for the race, because once you get down to that race effort, your body's going to get pretty warm. And if you overdress, you're just going to limit your performance because you're going to be sweating and overheating. So you definitely want to stay cool for that, but stay warm during the warm up. Start time 7:30 for the marathon, 8:30 for the half. So it's going to be fun to have the half and marathoners meeting up at the finish line, and we can all celebrate together after. With the warm up, again, if I'm working backwards, so I was aiming to be there at 6:30 for my 7:30 marathon start. I'm probably going to check my bag at 7 o'clock, hang out for a couple minutes, and then probably head out for my warm up around 7:10. I'll do 10 minutes of easy jogging, and then I'll probably get in my start corral about 10 minutes before the race, just so I'm settled in there, make sure I have all my gels and everything with me, and that I'm good to go for the race. So I definitely recommend getting in that start corral and getting in the correct start corral based on what your expected finishing time is, just so you make sure that you are not blocking faster runners from behind. Or if you are a faster runner, if you start way back, then you're going to have to weave through traffic. And for something like a marathon, you do not want any extra wasted energy weaving around the road or having to dip and dodge. That's another reason why people get cramps, is it's muscle fatigue or breakdown from doing silly stuff in the first half of the race. For both of these races, you do not want to have any wasted energy. Hit the tangents as straight as you can on the race course. Don't give anything away, and you'll get to the finish line a lot quicker. So again, if you're like looking at being at the very front of the race, make sure that if you're a marathoner, you're probably running under 3 hours. If you're a half marathoner, probably running something under 125 if you're at the very front. And don't forget, there is pacers. I believe it's 310 plus and 130 plus for the pacing crews. So a nice chance to hop in with some even pace groups. So during the race, let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to start at the bottom point here. So those pace groups are an awesome spot to start, especially if you're a bit of a new racer and aren't as dialed in on your pace. And these guys are going to run really even splits towards the finish. So hop in with these pace groups, hop in the back of the group, and it just makes things so much easier when you're in a good pack of runners, especially if there's going to be headwind sections. We'll talk about the course coming up after. But if you can get in behind some taller runners and just draft in there, and it helps lower the RPE or perceived exertion during this, and goes a long way to making sure that you run even splits, don't waste energy, and then stick with them as long as possible, and maybe you'll be able to outkick them at the end and hop under your goal time. But pace groups, definitely highly recommend hopping with them. They usually have very experienced people doing this. There's the odd chance they miss their pacing, but it's few and far between. So highly recommend. So let's talk about during the race. So you've done all of this sodium and carb and hydration preloading, but as we go into these events, you're going to be sweating and burning lots of calories during this. So we need to stay topped up on any of these events, a half or marathon. So here are some of my recommendations for you. Make sure you've tested this in training before. I'm going to keep hammering that home. Nothing new on race day. And remember, on the course, there's only hydration and noon and bananas. So if you're not used to any of that, and you'll probably need to bring gels along with you. I personally use about 6 gels during a marathon, and then 2 to 3-ish during a half marathon. But carb wise, we want to just steadily keep taking them in. I usually have a gel in my hand, and I'm just slowly sipping away on it over the course of 15 to 20 minutes. So I don't have to like down a whole gel and worry about getting GI issues. I'm just keeping the carbs steadily going in. Most athletes should be aiming for something in the 35 to 60 grams of easily digestible fuel, something like gels or a drink mix, and that's per hour. So if we're talking about a 3-hour marathoner doing 50 grams of carbs an hour, they need to be finding a way to get 150 grams of carbs during this race. So that would be, if a standard gel is 25 grams, that's about 6 gels they need to get in a race like that. So if you're looking at more like 4 hours, then you need to add another couple gels to that. And again, you want to train these limits in there, because the gut is trainable. And if you can get into those higher limits, it's going to give you some more capacity later in the race to have more fuel on board. Hydration. So these are typically cooler races, so hydration isn't as big of a factor, but there's many years where it is a little bit warmer. You're also working out there for a long time, so your body temperature is going to go up. So I usually recommend a bit of water at every single aid station. That's every 2 to 3K. If you get a little bit in at each of those aid stations, you should be able to stay topped off enough so that you don't get dehydrated enough to start to affect your performance, because as you start to get to certain levels of dehydration, your performance, your blood thickens and your performance just goes down really quickly. So if you can just stay topped off on that on a cooler spring day, you should be pretty good. Get a little bit of water at every aid station. Don't be afraid, if you need to walk through an aid station, to make sure you get that water on board. And just if you're doing that at aid stations, just kind of signal that you're slowing down, stay to the side in case there's people trying to run through the aid stations, that you're not going to cause a pile up of bodies in there. Electrolytes. So nice thing is we have noon on course for this, so you can stay topped off with electrolytes. So maybe your goal at a bunch of the aid stations is to get a cup of water and a cup of electrolytes at each one, just a gulp of each, and you can stay topped off all the way through. If you don't want to use noon or haven't used it before, there is the option to bring, like, you can order like sodium pills that you could bring along with you in like a plastic bag, and then pop one of those in while you're taking water at an aid station. But marathoners, half marathoners won't need tons if it's a cooler day, but still not bad to just stay topped off on it. Doesn't hurt to have a little extra on board versus getting depleted. But marathoners, especially as you're going longer, you may want to get in something like 500 milligrams per hour if you can, just to stay topped off. And I already talked about that final pack running note on this, but again, this is all about efficiency and energy, so that keeping that energy as high as you can, so that we're going to do that through the carbs, the hydration, electrolytes, make sure our body has the fuel it needs, and then through the pack running and nice even splits is where you're going to stay efficient during the race and don't give away any extra unneeded energy. You're going to need all of it to get to this finish line the best you can. All right, let's do a little course review here. So I'm going to bring up the course map. So I'm going to start with the marathon. So all right, so we start out with this little loop at the top here. So this is marathoners. When we talk about weather, a lot of times what we get is typically a north or a west wind, or like a northwest wind. Those are the most typical ones. But we got to be prepared for any sort of conditions here. But I'm going to kind of assume that it's something in those common ones, northwest or northwest. So we start off with this little loop at the top here. You can see I have the water stations marked on there as well. So there's lots of aid stations every 2 kilometers or so. I would check the website for the exact ones where noon and bananas will be. That will be on the website. So check that out. But we got this first little loop here, and don't forget we have the elevation map at the top here. So first 3.3K, this loop is pretty flat at the top before kind of a screaming downhill. So we go from 178 to 131. So that's going to be 40 meters of downhill in just over a K and a half. So that's going to be this big bombing downhill that goes under the 401. And then at 5K, we have a decent climb from 130 up to 170. So that downhill you just had, you're going to give it all back on the one kind of significant climb of the route. Biggest tip I have for this one is be relaxed and bomb that downhill. Go decently fast, but don't push it, and just let yourself recover and save some of that energy for the uphill. But key part on the uphill is this is still very early in the race. Just find a nice steady rhythm. There's lots of downhill and flat to come, so don't expend extra energy on this hill trying to crush this hill. A lot of people go way too hard on this hill, and then they're just going to blow up later in the race if they put too much energy in it. Just kind of keep the effort steady. It's going to ramp up a little bit, but just let the pace bleed a little bit. You probably just got a little bit of time in the bank on that downhill, so just let it bleed on the uphill, and then your main part is just being able to get back to your kind of goal pace quickly as you get back over the top. So that's kind of from almost a K long hill up that 5 to 6K stretch. So again, super smooth. Don't give anything away there. And then for a while, we're bombing down Yonge Street till about 10K here. So 168, we're going downhill slightly on this section, but it's not going to be anything too significant. You'll get like a little push along the way. So don't be surprised if you're maybe paces a couple seconds quicker on this section, but really anybody can run well in a marathon up to 32K, but your really goal here is to save yourself for that last 10K so that you can finish strong. That's where everybody bleeds most of their time. So you got to hold it together till then. So again, efficiency and being smart in this first bit is super imperative. So 10 to 13, we kind of got this snaking section through here, kind of up and down, but we start the downhill right around 12K. We start to get our most significant downhill, which is about 8 kilometers of net downhill in this section. So this is a great spot that we're going to be able to bank some time, for no extra effort. The key part is you get to go downhill here, but don't rip it too hard. Just take the free time in the bank on this one, and then save your energy for what's going to come on the flat parts. Hopefully we get a nice north wind that day, and then we can just fly even faster during the section. Even if it's north or west, we're going to get some push on this section. So let's hope for some of those wind conditions. But really, this whole section through Young and then through Rosedale Valley Road is a nice long downhill stretch. So we're going from 174 meters down to 78 meters, so almost 100 meters of descent in that section. That is significant. That's like essentially going up the like escarpment in Milton. So it's spread over 8K, so a little easier on the legs than bombing straight down an escarpment, but really nice to get that free 8K of downhill. Just be nice to yourself. If you hammer it, you're going to blow up your quads on there. So just being super smart on that part to not do anything silly in that section. So then when we get to about the half marathon point is where things flatten out, and also where a lot of times we start to have to deal with some wind, and really the back half is where the race starts. So you want to get through that first half as smooth as possible, keep that pace as easy feeling as possible to set yourself up for this back half. So we're going to run through downtown from 21 till about 27K here. Just watch out for some of these sections. I can't remember if there's streetcars and tracks and stuff on these parts, but just watch out for potholes, things like that you could roll an ankle or hurt yourself in those sections. So just if you're in those packs, maybe give a little bit of a gap. Just keep an eye out for any holes in the ground as to not torture race on something silly like that. But really still flat along this section, maybe slight net downhill. But if we're getting that west wind, you're going to start to feel it whistling between some of the buildings in that section. Biggest part is just stay relaxed. Your pace might slow a little bit in the headwind section, but don't forget we're going west and then east. So at some point you're going to get that tailwind back. Best case scenario would be if we just got a north wind all day and it was crosswind, or maybe no wind at all that day if the weather gods are really looking down on us. So 27K is where we start to get down to the lakeshore. So as we go 27 all the way out till about 35, we're running this long section along the lakeshore. So on the way out, we're running mostly on the road by the looks of it. And then when we get out here around 32.5K is where we're going to hop on the trail for this last section out to the out and back part. So it's kind of cool in this one. 35K is really a huge spot where the marathon starts to get real tough. So if you're thinking of your goal in mind of how to pace this, you really want to get controlled out to that 35-kilometer mark so that you can set yourself up to bring it home strong. Around 28K there, you're running almost right by the finish line. So that can be a bit of a demoralizing moment, and 28 to 35 is always a tough section of the race because you're kind of in the meat of the race and you really need to hold pace. And just a super key section to stay on your fueling, stay focused, and make it out to that 35K mark in as good of shape as you can, because then you got to bring it back. Hopefully, if it's a west wind, maybe a little tailwind coming home, but hopefully just minimal winds that day. But really staying smooth there, and you just got to watch because there is one hill with about 2K to go. There's just it really isn't that big of a hill, but it comes right over just past the Boulevard Club, and you're coming up and it's kind of at the top of this hill where the Legion is. So it's only 77 up to 84. It's only a 7-meter climb, but it's just where it is in the race at 40K. It can feel pretty tough. So again, just kind of get over the top of that hill because you do get a little bit of downhill. It doesn't feel like it after that, but you will get a little bit of downhill. And it looks like in those final kilometers might be a little bit desolate out here as you're probably running along the MGT, the Martin Goodman Trail, and then there will probably be a little lip you got to climb over before you cross over the road, over the bridge here down to the finish line with about 200 meters to go as you cross that bridge. So that's a good little snapshot of our marathon course. So really our high level keys are being smooth through that first half, taking advantage of the downhill, conserving energy, being smooth from that 21 to 35. That is a pivotal part of your race to hold it together and keep it smooth, leave some gas for that last 7K. So that's the marathon. Let's hop into the half marathon course. So half marathon, slightly different from the marathon. They don't have as much add-on at the start. So we're starting in the same spot, but going south right away. So for the half marathoners, it's really you have that first 600 meters that's flat, and then you're going like 600 into that 1.5K is coming really early, bombing that downhill. But also nice that you get the hill a little bit earlier as well. That's about 2K in. Again, even the half marathoners, even more so. You have so much downhill coming that if you give away time on that uphill, you're just going to take away your advantage of being able to use this downhill. This is a super fast half marathon course. So give yourself a chance to be able to exploit that downhill and really finish strong on the flat. So super smooth on that hill. We're talking 2.1K up to 3.1. So very early in the races, you're still finding your rhythm. So biggest advice, do not gas that hill. And then you're going to continue to bomb down Yonge Street again to that 10K where the marathoners split off to the right there a little ways back. You're just going to hop right onto Rosedale Valley Road and look at this downhill from 5K all the way to almost 13K. You get a sweet downhill. So we're looking all the way back here from Eglinton all the way down to about 13, 14K in the race. You have downhill. So it's a great spot to get some free time. But again, setting yourself up to be able to finish strong in that last 7K. You're only 2/3 of the way done when you get to that downhill. And it can be a bit of a shock to the system as you're going from running downhill for so long to go in the flats. It almost feels like you're running uphill a little bit. So if you can control yourself, stay relaxed, get the free speed on the downhill. If you can set yourself up for that last 7K when it gets flat or it's slightly net downhill, then you're going to be able to finish at a scorching pace and probably run an awesome PB, hopefully. So again, as you get to 14K there, then you're just zipping along through downtown there across Front Street for most of it. As you get close to Exhibition Place where that bib pickup was, you're at 20K there, launching along the lakeshore. And then when you make that final turn, you only have 100 meters to go. So if you feel like you got some gas in the tank there as you start to get to 19K at Fort York, there's a nice little downhill you can take advantage of. But now's your time to start pushing here, because once you make that final turn, you only have 100 meters left and you can push to the finish line there. Half marathoners, just keep an eye out. The marathoners and half marathoners will come together right at that kind of 21K. The marathoners coming kind of over the bridge there, and then they'll be coming. The half marathoners will be coming down. The marathoners will be coming on your right. So just keep an eye out. Those marathoners will have some jello legs at that point. So be nice to them to knock them over with 100 meters to go. All right. So that is our Toronto Marathon course review and some tips to help you succeed on the day. Best of luck to all of you out there racing. Again, if you see me in my blue LP singlet, come say hi. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in any of the comment sections below. If this is on a Facebook group, in the comments there, I'll keep an eye out. Also in the YouTube comments, I'll respond to there as well. And if anybody wants any more info on our structured training at LP Endurance, feel free to shoot me a message or hop on our website, lpfit.ca. We'll see you all in a couple weeks. Happy training and best of luck on race day. Cheers.